All right, guys, chapter 10 study guide. Here we go. Question number 1, axis of symmetry is the y-axis. So basically, remember the axis of symmetry is the line that splits our parabola into half. So this question is asking us to find the graph where the axis of symmetry is that y-axis. So we're looking for the y-axis, splitting it in half. And as you guys can see, that would be graph A. Right, this is our y-axis. The y-axis is literally splitting our graph into half. All right, so that would be A. All right, next one. The quadratic has no solutions. As you guys know in our review, we had said that if a quadratic has no solutions, well, it has no x-intercepts, right? That's in your guys' notes. So which one of these graphs has no x-intercepts? If we look at graph A, again, this one is our answer because literally it doesn't cross the x-axis. If we look at B, this would have 2 solutions, D would have 1 solution, and C would have 2 solutions. So our answer is A. All right, question number 3. The quadratic has a vertex at -2, -3. All right, remember, vertex could either be the lowest or the highest point. Let's see, this vertex, definitely not at -2, 3. This one, -2, -3. Nice, that definitely works. That is our vertex. So answer for this one would be B. All right, next one, the A value of the quadratic is negative. This is also in your guys' notes. If the A value is negative, our quadratic is pointing down, or it's like a frowning face. Like, or you're, I don't know, it's frowning or pointing down. So this is the only quadratic that's pointing down. So yeah, that would be C. And then number 5, the quadratic has 1 solution. All right, 1 solution, as I said earlier, that would be part D. It's only touching the x-intercept once. So graph D would be the answer. All right, next page. We want to go ahead and use the quadratic function y is equal to 2x squared minus 2 to solve for the vertex. Let me just go ahead and zoom in here. All right, solving for the vertex. Now, a lot of you, when I was in class working with these problems, read what the question asks. This question is asking to solve for the vertex. A lot of you were solving for the solutions. So, very important. In your guys' notes, you guys know that to find the vertex, we have 2 different ways. I feel like the first way is always the easiest, since when working through lessons, a lot of you found completing the square to be complicated. So let's go ahead and solve for the vertex using our formula method. We can go ahead and rewrite our equation. H is equal to -b divided by 2a. All right, so we look at our original function. We notice something weird. We notice that we don't actually have a b value, right? If we wanted to write this in standard form, we could go ahead and write it as 2x squared plus 0x minus 2. All right, so since there's no b value, we go ahead and just put that as 0. -0 or 0, that's the same thing. 0 can't have a sign, right? Whether it's negative or positive. And then divided by 2 times, well, our a value is 2. All right, so now we have 0 divided by 4, which is just 0 divided by any number is just 0. All right, so our vertex is going to be in coordinate form, right? We want the coordinate of the vertex. That's going to be 0. Now we need to figure out our y coordinate, or our k. As you guys know, we just go ahead and plug it into our original equation. So we plug it into this. We plug in 0 into this. So let's go ahead and do that. Our k is equal to 2 times 0 squared minus 2. All right, as you guys know, exponents first, right? GEM does exponents before multiplication. 0 squared, that's literally 0 times 0, so that's still 0. 0 times 2 is still 0, and then 0 minus 2 gives us -2. All right, so that is our vertex. All right, solve for the axis of symmetry. As you guys know in your guys' notes, you guys should have this, that the axis of symmetry, the actual answer is literally just you put x is equal to, remember you need to have x is equal to, because our axis of symmetry is a vertical line. You need to have this whole equation. So x is equal to, and then you just bring down this x coordinate. X is equal to 0. That's all you have to do. All right, question number 8. Will the quadratic have a maximum or a minimum? All right, so basically, we can look at our a value once again. Our a is 2, so clearly that's positive. If our quadratic is positive, it's pointing up. All right, so remember our vertex is either going to be our maximum or minimum point. So if we look at our vertex, we can see that our vertex is definitely a minimum. Question number 9. Solve for the solutions of the quadratic. So I give you guys all those different methods on the review. Please use them for the test. So isolating x is the best method, or that's the same thing as getting x by itself. All right. So in your guys' notes, you guys should see that we set our equation equal to 0 first, and then we go ahead and solve for x. We go ahead and add 2 to both sides. We get 2x squared is equal to 2. We divide both sides by 2. Now we're just left with x squared is equal to, well, 2 divided by 2 is just 1. And then to get x by itself, lastly, we go ahead and take the square root of both sides. Remember, when you take the square root, you have to write the plus or minus. All right, so on the left-hand side, we have x. On the right-hand side, we have, well, the plus or minus, and then the square root of 1. Remember, when we're thinking about square roots, we're thinking about what number multiplied by itself would equal the number underneath the radical. Clearly, 1 times 1 still gives us 1, so the answer is x is equal to plus or minus 1. That's our final answer. All right, questions 10 through 13, literally the same process. All right, so we go ahead and use our formula method for the vertex. H is equal to negative b divided by 2a. Our b in this problem is 8. So negative 8 divided by 2 times our a is 1. Negative 8 divided by 2 gives us negative 4. All right, so that's our x-coordinate of our vertex, negative 4. And then our y-coordinate is going to be, let's see, or our k, you can think of it. We plug in negative 4 into wherever we see x. Negative 4 squared plus 8 times negative 4 plus 12. All right, negative 4 squared gives us 16. 8 times negative 4 gives us negative 32. And then plus 12. All right, 16 minus 32 is negative 16. Negative 16 plus 12 gives us negative 4. All right, and that is our final answer. That's our vertex. That's the coordinate of our vertex. All right, solve for the axis of symmetry. As I told you guys with problem number 7, you literally write x is equal to your x-coordinate. X is equal to negative 4. Number 12, will the quadratic have a maximum or a minimum? Right, our a value is 1, so it's positive. So just like the last problem, it'll be pointing up. So our vertex will be a minimum. All right, 13, solve for the solutions of the quadratic. Factoring is the best method. So on the test, it's not going to tell you which is the best method to use. So this is just practice. But anyways, I know that I can factor because I can go ahead and notice that, well, I can use the x method for this. So let's go ahead and use that x method. 12 goes up here and 8 goes down here. So two numbers that multiply to 12 and add up to 8. That's going to be 6 and 2. All right. So once we get to here, we know that we can factor it using this 6 and 2. So we set our equation equal to 0. X squared plus 8x plus 12 is equal to 0. The left-hand side we could factor. That's going to be x. Let me just write it out first. Remember, we put our x's, and then we literally write each of these numbers. Plus 6 plus 2 is equal to 0. All right, and then we set each equation equal to 0. X plus 6 is equal to 0. X plus 2 is equal to 0. All right, these are our two separate equations, so we can go ahead and solve for x by themselves. X plus 6, we go ahead and subtract 6 from both sides. We get x is equal to negative 6. Subtract 2 from both sides over here. We get x is equal to negative 2. Those are our two solutions, negative 6 and negative 2. All right, question number 14. We want to use the graph below to answer each question. So identify the vertex. So our vertex can either be the highest or lowest point. In this case, it would be the lowest point, right? So our vertex is here. Our coordinate of that is negative 6, comma, negative 5. Identify the axis of symmetry. So as I said with the previous problem, same thing. We write x is equal to, and then you just write the x coordinate. X is equal to negative 6. All right, identify the solutions. So the solutions are our x-intercepts, wherever it crosses our x-axis. Negative 8, negative 4. Identify the domain. Well, the domain is the furthest our graph goes to the left and the furthest our graph goes to the right. So we can see that our graph continues growing upwards, but also it continues to get wider and wider and wider as it continues to grow upwards, right? So all the way to the left, it won't stop growing, right? It won't stop getting wider and wider. So all the way to the left, we can say that it goes to negative infinity. All the way on the right, we can say that it goes to positive infinity. All right, remember, with the infinity symbols, we use parentheses. All right, 18, identify the range. So we know that the range is from the lowest to the highest point. So the lowest point is our vertex. But remember, we're thinking about the y values now. So on our y-axis, that point is negative 5. So negative 5. Remember, with numbers, we use a bracket. And then it never stops growing, so it goes to infinity. Is a vertex a maximum or a minimum? Right, well, it's a minimum, right? It's the lowest point. Minimum. All right, is the a value positive or negative? Well, same thing as I went over before. If our graph or our parabola is pointing up, our a is positive. So positive. All right, question number 21. We want to go ahead and solve the quadratic function. 3x squared minus 12 is equal to 0. As I told you guys before, I won't have which method is the best, but we know that our isolating x is the best method because we have x appearing only once. All right, so we can go ahead and solve it. Let's see, we go ahead and add 12 to both sides. We get 3x squared is equal to 12. All right, we want to get x by itself, so we go ahead and divide by 3 first. We get x squared is equal to 4. And then we go ahead and take the square root, right? We want to get x by itself. Lastly, we want to undo that square. Final answer, on the left-hand side, we have x. On the right-hand side, remember, we take the plus or minus. And then the square root of 4 is just 2. Final answer, x is equal to plus or minus 2. All right, question number 22. Solve the quadratic function x squared plus 7x plus 6 is equal to 0. Factoring is the best method. All right, so x squared plus 7x plus 6. Remember, with factoring, if there's no greatest common factor, we go ahead and use our x method. We want to find two numbers that multiply to 6 but add up to 7. Well, that'll just be 6 and 1. All right, so our equation is already equal to 0. We know that we can factor the left-hand side as this. X plus 6, x plus 1 is equal to 0. And then we go ahead and set each of these equal to 0. X plus 6 is equal to 0. Or x plus 1 is equal to 0. All right, subtract 6 from both sides. We get x is equal to negative 6. Subtract 1 from both sides. We get x is equal to negative 1. Final answer, negative 6 comma negative 1. Or I guess you could have just circled that as well too on the test. Doesn't really matter. It's a test. It's not go formative. I know what your guys' answers are. All right, question number 23. 3x squared minus 30x is equal to negative 75. All right, so remember, factoring is the best method. So remember, with factoring, we have to go ahead and set it equal to 0. So on this right-hand side, we have negative 75. To make that a 0, we have to add 75 to both sides. So add 75, add 75. 3x squared minus 30x plus 75 is equal to 0. All right, so from here, a lot of you would try to use the x method, but remember with factoring, we always factor out the greatest common factor. So our greatest common factor is 3. So 3 times x squared minus 10x plus 25 is equal to 0. All right, from here, we can go ahead and just divide both sides by 3. All right, and then let me just put this up here. So dividing by 3, we get x squared minus 10x plus 25. 0 divided by 3 still gives us 0. All right, using our x method, we want to find two numbers that multiply to 25, add up to negative 10. Well, that'll be negative 5 and negative 5. All right, so using this, we know that we could write x minus 5 equal to 0. Right, you can set each of these equal to 0, but you still get the same answer. So you only have to do one of them. X minus 5 is equal to 0. Add 5 to both sides. We get x is equal to 5. All right, last three problems. The back page, let's see. We go ahead and solve the quadratic function x squared minus 3x minus 7 is equal to 0. I told you guys in class that completing the square, not to use that method. So we use the quadratic formula, right? Always good practice just to write what our a, b, and c is equal to. So our a is equal to 1, our b is equal to negative 3, and our c is equal to negative 7. All right, so inputting this into our quadratic formula, we have negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so negative b, or the opposite of b, are negative of negative 3 would be positive 3. So 3 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 7, all divided by 2 times 1. All right, so GEMDAs, we start to simplify grouping the numbers that are grouped together underneath the square root. So negative 3 squared gives us 9. So let's just go ahead and bring this back up here. 3 plus or minus the square root of 9. We bring down, or we still need that minus sign. 4 times 1 gives us 4. 4 times negative 7 gives us negative 28. All divided by, well, 2 times 1 is just 2. All right, 9 minus a negative 28. As you guys know, we go ahead and add those together. That gives us 3 plus or minus the square root of 37 divided by 2. All right, from here, we know that 37 is a prime. We can't split that number up anymore into two factors using our factor tree method. So that is our final answer. Anytime you have a radical, we just keep it in this plus or minus form. If you had a number, like a whole number, like maybe 1 or 3, I don't know, you would have to split it up into our two separate equations and simplify. But this would be our simplest form. So you just keep it in that form. That is our final answer. All right, 25, solve the quadratic function. As I told you guys in class, this one was another quadratic formula one. All right, so using the quadratic formula, same thing, but this one's a little bit different. Same process, but our first equation was already set equal to 0, or already in standard form. This one, to put it in standard form, we need to have it 2x squared plus 6x plus 8, right? We have to add 8 to both sides to make that 0 is equal to 0. All right, so we go ahead and use our quadratic formula up here. Let's go ahead and write our letters. A is equal to 2, B is equal to 6, C is equal to 8. All right, so we have negative 6 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 6 squared, minus 4 times 2 times 8, all divided by 2 times 2. All right, just as we previously did, we go ahead and simplify the radical first. So we have negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 6 squared gives us 36, minus 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 8 gives us 64. All divided by 4. All right, so now we want to have 36 minus 64, so we can simplify that radical one more step. But as you guys know, that would just be a negative number. So anytime we take the square root of a negative, we know that it's no solution. So we can go ahead and stop there. No solution. Or NS on the test, whichever one. I know what you guys are talking about. All right, 26. Last one. Write the function y is equal to 4x squared minus 8x plus 3 in vertex form. All right, remember our vertex form is in the form y is equal to a x minus h squared plus k. So we want to go ahead and get it in that form. So first, you guys can look at your notes, but remember, we want to get into this form, so we have to factor out our a value. We want to start to get this process going. So if we factor out a value, or we factor out our 4. So let me just write the equation again. Y is equal to 4x squared minus 8x plus 3. Remember, we want to factor out our a value from just these two terms. And that'll start to get us in the form of where we have a parentheses. All right, so y is equal to 4. And then in parentheses, this step should be second nature to you guys. This is factoring, right? You guys got a lot of practice with factoring throughout the semester. In parentheses, we have x squared minus 2x. All right, 4x squared minus 8x. And then we still have that plus 3 on the outside. All right, now we go ahead and complete the square. Complete that blank space. Y is equal to 4 times x squared minus 2x plus that blank space. Plus 3 on the outside. Let's bring that down. Remember the blank space. You go ahead and divide that by 2. Negative 2 divided by 2 gives us negative 1. Negative 1 squared, or negative 1 times negative 1, gives us 1. All right, so we completed the square, but remember, we can't just magically add a number to this equation. Technically, if we go ahead and distribute this, we distribute that 4 to the 1. Technically, we added 4 to this problem. So we have to go ahead and subtract 4 just to even it out. All right, and then we're almost done. Last step, we have to go ahead and rewrite. We completed the square, so we're going to go ahead and rewrite the parentheses as a square. So first, let's just write everything else. 3 minus 4 gives us negative 1. All right, so we want to rewrite our parentheses as a square. So that's literally a square on the outside. And then in parentheses, as you guys know, in order to find out what goes in parentheses, it's going to be x. And then we take our b value and divide it by 2. Right? Negative 2 divided by 2 gives us negative 1. All right, so that is our final answer. 4x minus 1 squared minus 1. Y is equal to 4x minus 1 squared minus 1. All right, there you go. Please, please, please have your guys' study guide for the test.